Hello, everybody. This is Todd Dewey from Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel, and I love to listen to TNC Radio.live.
You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNC Radio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
And welcome in TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Irvin and James Rogers. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, it's been busy, been real busy. I'm glad to be able to be back on the show. It's been a crazy couple of weeks where I wasn't able to be here, but here we are.
Yeah, for all of us. So it's good to be back going again. Jamie, how are you doing, sir?
Well, I have felt better. I picked up a little nasty cold, but I will survive.
And where did you pick up this little nasty cold?
So last week I was in Las Vegas at the Apex SEMA show, and great to be all together. But I think I've heard a lot of people came home and they picked up a bug somewhere.
Oh goodness, yeah, that's the problem with conventions and stuff, and and I don't think it's just about COVID or whatever. I think we spent so much time away from each other that like we lost some immunity or something.
Yeah, I think so too, because I know the last few shows I've gone to over the last, let's say, 12 months, including Apex 21, I got lucky. Like I didn't get anything. I skated through COVID. I never got it, just was really lucky. But this time, I think my immune system just wasn't ready for that many people, and it was busy. The amount of people at the show this year compared to 21 was significantly different.
Wow. I was sitting next to a guy a couple of nights ago, and he kind of leans over to me and breathes on me and says, "Man, I don't feel good. I feel like I got a fever."
Oh my God.
Dude, back off. So you're out there at Apex. What'd you learn?
Well, I had a lot of good conversations with people, but one of them that really stood out for me was the changes that are coming in refrigerant for commercial vehicles. So in the, I got to sit down with Christina Spalding. She was one of the most intelligent and well-spoken women I've ever had an opportunity to interview for my show. She was just an absolute pleasure to speak to, and she works for the Chemours company. They are the inventors of Freon, if you don't know that company. And she was explaining to me that the EPA has mandated a change in refrigerant. So we're going to move away from R134A, and we're moving to something called R1234YF, or just YF for short. One of the things that I was interested in is like, how quickly is this going to happen? And basically every 2 years over the next few years, there's going to be less and less of the vehicles manufactured with the older systems using R134A. And more of them will be using this new system. And eventually there'll be a complete switch over to YF, and we won't use R134A. So the immediate, impact on commercial drivers
You got to slow down for some of us here.
Sure.
So what are we using right now?
So the standard since the 90s and even before that has been to use what they call R134A.
Okay. And before that it was straight Freon, right?
Yeah, it's funny, there's really only been 2 changes in the last like 60, 70 years,
right,
on refrigerant. So I can't remember the exact dates, but if you go back, like let's say from the 1930s on to the 1990s, it was this Freon style, but of course that was really bad for the ozone. Yeah. Then they moved to R134A, and that's been in production for like 35 years.
Okay,
approximately.
I think before it was like something called like R50 or something, and then what R134As, that's essentially used in almost everything except for maybe commercial applications. So that's a big move. That's a
Yeah,
big move.
it's the most common refrigerant used in light duty, medium, and heavy duty. Really, I mean, it's been very, very stable and very widely used. But the problem is that it still has that what do they call it? Potent greenhouse gas. So they want to get rid of it, and they want to go with this YF, which is climate friendly alternative refrigerant is what it's classified as. And just so you know, people who are listening, like a lot of your light duty vehicles are already using YF. They started with light duty a few years ago. It started in a 2015 final ruling where the EPA started to mandate it.
Okay, so the number one complaint, and remember, I'm a layman when it comes to this kind of refrigerant stuff. Number one complaint when we went made the change 35 years ago was, gosh, the new stuff is okay, but it doesn't work as well. Are we hearing that again? Is this stuff is okay, but it doesn't work as well as the last one?
So according to Christina, who again, like I said, very intelligent woman who she did such a good job of explaining all this to me. The polymers and the elastomers and all of the chemical composition of this stuff is very similar. And they expect the performance characteristics to be virtually unchanged is kind of what they're anticipating. Now, how does that actually translate on into real world application? As we all know, what the engineers spec and what happens in the real world, sometimes there's a little bit of a difference. So I think time will tell. But like I said, since 2015, when that ruling was made, they've been switching cars over to this YF for the last few years, and now commercial vehicles are going to be part of that as well. So I think there's already a lot of vehicles on the road using YF, and I personally haven't heard of a lot of complaints. So
how does that tie into, like, how's that going to affect in the commercial world as far as technicians who are certified to work with this? Because that also seems to be an issue in the industry. Sometimes you can't find a tech that's certified to work with 134, or they might only have one guy, or they got to have a machine to do it. I mean, was that?
I was interested in that too, because like anytime the EPA has been involved in mandating changes, and then the manufacturers have to go and figure out how to meet those mandates, all we have to say is after treatment, and we know what kind of a cluster that's been. So my concern and my question to her was, like, how is this going to impact the cost of operation for trucks, and how is this going to impact maintenance and parts? And so, I mean, those are really three separate subjects, so we can break those down. But the first one is around cost, and we're going to have a supply demand thing happen with R134, because as vehicles, and think about how many more light duty vehicles there are, but as those vehicles stop using R134, commercial vehicles stop, then R134 supply demand just tells us that price is going to start to go up. So if you've got an older vehicle using R134, the actual refrigerant is going to be more expensive. YF itself is probably more expensive to produce as well. So the cost of the refrigerant, I think we're going to see go up. As for the parts on the truck, the systems are virtually the same. Like she said, chemically they are kind of very similar. They're very stable. So she didn't anticipate a lot of change in the actual parts on the truck to make like a YF refrigerant system work versus an R134A. Like the actual components and parts used in the refrigerant system is going to be virtually the same. But what she did say is, she said that shops will need to have two different machines in their shop. They'll have to have an older machine for R134, and they'll have to have a machine specifically for YF.
Now, is there going to be did she mention that there was going to be a conversion to have to convert your vehicle to system or any part of it?
No, it's not like a reverse compatibility thing where older equipment will have to be retrofitted like they did when they mandated that in California for after treatment. If
Right.
your truck was made with R134, you can run it to the end of that truck's life using R134. But then if you buy a new truck and it's a YF truck, you're going to have to use YF refrigerant from then on with that truck.
Interesting. Well, they just keep adding on top of it, don't they?
They keep making the systems more complex, that's for sure. One of the questions that I had to her is, what happens in the future with a mixed fleet that has some internal combustion engines and some electric powered trucks? What would be the impact there? And she had something interesting to say about that. Maybe in our next segment we could talk a little bit about that, Tom.
Sure. All right, then let's do this. Let's go ahead and take a break now. And when we come back, we'll wrap that up. We got some other things we're going to be talking about too. So you want to stick with us right here on TNCradio.live. Mind your trucking business. We'll be right back.
Hot Shots Secret presents Steve Summers' Overnight Drive nightly at midnight Eastern, 11 Central on TNCradio.live or download the app .tncradio.live.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCradio.live.
And welcome back, TNCradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Happy to have you with us this evening. I'm Tom Kelly, along with James Rogers and Jamie Irvin. And we were talking about Jamie's experience going down to Vegas, where he won a whole lot of money at the roulette table. No, wait a minute. That's not what we were. Scratch that part. We're talking about what he learned at the Apex conference. And Jamie, we ran out of time there in the last segment. I think there was more you wanted to enlighten us on. So tell us more.
Right. Well, we were talking about the regulation changes with refrigerant and how that's going to impact commercial vehicles. So like, don't worry, if your truck is running R134 right now, you're not going to have to do any retrofits or switch or anything. But when you buy new trucks over the next few years, progressively, all commercial and off-road equipment will be switched over to this new kind of refrigerant. The short name for it is called YF. I was speaking to the creators of Freon. It's called the Chemours Company, and they have come out with a brand for this YF refrigerant. It's called Opteon. One of my questions, though, was what happens as fleets start switching to electric vehicles? Because what refrigerant needs are there going to be on electric vehicles, and what happens if you have a mixed fleet, right? Some of them are ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine, some of them are electric. And Christina Spalding, who again, just a brilliant woman who I really enjoyed talking to, she was explaining to me that actually with electric vehicles, the refrigerant needs are actually more than the ICE vehicles, because there's cooling needs for the electrical components on the vehicle. And so there's even going to be more demand for this YF refrigerant. And that, of course, is going to be a cost factor towards maintaining and operating those electric vehicles. So interesting how, as in some ways, electric vehicles will have a lot less replacement parts and less maintenance costs, but in others, there'll be more demand on certain systems like batteries and refrigerant. So that was just an interesting part that I learned while I was there.
Anything else jump out at you while you were there that, made you think, wow, this is a new world we're moving into?
I think the one thing that was interesting to me was how little or maybe there was just less emphasis on supply chain issues. Manufacturers, I think, have just said, all right, this is the new world we live in. Lead times need to be adjusted accordingly. and I was talking to some distributors of one of my clients who's a manufacturer that has 14 plants, and they were saying that control over your supply chain and visibility of your parts is now one of the most important parts of maintaining your supply chain. And I think there's a lot of companies now who, if before the pandemic they were investing in their own supply chain, they did very well. And other companies who were really, had that all farmed out to other entities were really, really put at risk. And so there's been a reevaluation now of business strategy moving forward. And we saw, like, for example, Diesel Ford announced a completely new company, Alliant Power. They've launched this new brand. They want to have more control over their supply chain, more control over how the products get to their customers and who those customers are. So I'm seeing a shift, and there's just a little less panic about that conversation and more of a discussion around, okay, we know economic tough times are probably coming. We know there's a recession looming. We know another bear market might be right on its heels. And we know that supply chain challenges are not going to ease off in any real capacity, any real way in the next, like, let's say, year to two. So the attitude that I saw in people and the way that they're approaching it is just very different compared to, let's say, 12 months ago, where there was a lot more excited conversation about it.
Interesting. Are you glad you went?
Other than picking up the cold, yeah, I'm glad I went. It's always good to be at these industry events because you get, first of all, there's I'm a big proponent of digital. It's very powerful tools, and it really helps you front load relationships, but you really get to cement the relationships in person. Mm-hmm. And when these events come together, it gives you the unique opportunity of being able to capture a tremendous amount of information in a very short period of time. And as a media creator, it's always good to get to these shows to be able to create media and share that with our audience. So yeah, I was happy to go, but wish I could have done so without picking up a cold.
I hear that. All right. Well, Jamie, we know you have to bug out of here for another appointment, but we appreciate you being with us today. And of course, you'll be back with us next week as we continue our discussions. So you stay on as long as you want, or you can. James, I want to shift. We're going to push in the clutch, shift gears here a little bit. That was a little at that point, you were supposed to grind your gears when I did that, and
right. There's a tendency for that to happen.
Yeah. So I wanted to. There are a couple of different things that I want to talk about here, and we talked about a couple of these during our break. But one of them I didn't talk about yet, but I want to get your opinion on. Is this? Is there or is there not a diesel shortage?
No.
I'm a no as well. Yet, yeah. It. When I tell people that I do, that I work for a radio station that works with the trucking industry, right now, that's the first question I get.
Yeah, I've had multiple questions asked to me the same, just because my family and everybody else, and I'm like, no. Everywhere I go, I can find diesel. Of course, you hear the reports saying, "Oh, there's no diesel here." No, it's not a diesel shortage. It's not how it's being spun, and this all kind of tipped off when who was it? Tucker Carlson. He did a big report on it, and then of course, the rest of society in the world kind of is taking it. Oh, we're going to run out of diesel in 25 days. That's not the case. No, and we can go more into that because really what it is what they're talking about is that we're just below. We're like if everything was to come to a screeching halt, yes, we are. We have right now we're below the normal storage or stores or coffers supply that we have. But as far as being short, no, we're not going to run out because we have gasoline, and you can't have one without the other. You just can't.
Right. So let's see. The Mansfield Energy a major national supplier of diesel, issued a code red warning that some terminals were running out of fuel, forcing supply trucks to divert elsewhere. Okay, I hear that. And I get what you're saying about our overall storehouse of diesel is lower than it has been heading into winter in a very long time. That doesn't mean there's not enough. It's just our storehouse is lower than it has been. So if usually going into winter, I have 100 loaves of bread, but this year I only have 50 loaves of bread. That's okay as long as I only need 50 loaves of bread.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean that's exactly what it is. It's what we actually have in stores compared to previous years, and there's a lot that's tied into that. I mean, we've had a lot of refineries. I think somebody else did a report. I don't remember the exact people, but somebody did a report and they were talking about we've had like, I want to say somewhere around 7, it might be less than that, refineries that shut down. They just shut down. So it's got a lot to do with it's got a lot to do with production.
Right.
Of course,
that's a million barrels a day.
Correct.
That's only 6%.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
Only 6%. So people say 1 million barrels a day of less diesel. Oh my gosh, we're in so much. It's only 6%.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's a lot more produced per day. Yes, we have closed older refineries. No, there's not incentive right now to build new refineries. So yes, our net on barrels of diesel per day is lower than it was.
Yes.
But that doesn't, again, necessarily mean we are, quote unquote, running out of diesel. Now, here's the other thing I think we got to take into mind here too, James, is we have less loads. Agreed?
Agreed. Yeah, the volumes are way down.
Volumes are way down. If the volumes are way down, the need for diesel goes down.
Correct.
Okay. If this was switched around and we were a year ago right now where volumes were way up, couldn't keep up with the volumes, right? There's, we got too few drivers. We got too few trucks. We're not going to make it. We got to have more. Well, we're not talking about that now. Now we're talking about people who show up in St. Louis and do a drop off and have to sit there for 48, 72 hours just waiting for another load.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's actually a stark comparison. You're hitting on it about that. If we want to continue in the next segment, it absolutely is.
Okay, so let's keep talking about this. We're gonna take a break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes right here. TNCRadio.live. Mind your trucking business. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. Is there a senior in your life that you really respect, admire, appreciate, love? Is there a grandparent, a mentor, an aunt or uncle, somebody really special to you, still alive, still kicking, and just really someone who's made a difference in your life? I think we all have someone like that. I was watching a Hollywood program, and they had this Lifetime Achievement Award. Very moving that they brought up a Hollywood star who had a 50, 60-year career of success and honored them for what they had accomplished. And it gave me an idea. What if we did that same sort of thing with someone that we love, that we admired, a grandparent who's always been there? And why wait until they're gone? Why don't we celebrate that? Call everybody who knows them and throw a big part of your celebration called a Lifetime Achievement Award for somebody who's made our lives so much better just by being there. It not only would bring joy to them, but it'll be one of the happiest days of your life as well.
Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Kortman every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. As a professional driver, you are always being told about the importance of physical fitness, your health. But what about mental fitness? On the show each week, we take on a new topic, from loneliness to the power of gratitude to how to build strong relationships, all from the perspective of a driver's life. Every Monday on TNC Radio Live at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's Building Strong Minds.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on tncradio.live.
And welcome back in TNCradio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Tom Kelly here along with James Rogers. Jamie had to step out for the rest of the program, had another appointment. But James, let's talk a little bit more about this quote unquote diesel shortage. The point I was making right before we had to go to break was that I think we all agree that their loads are down. Okay.
Yes.
And that means there's not as many barrels of diesel being burned a day right now as there was, say, a year ago right now. Can we agree on that?
Agreed.
So again, yes. Okay. I will submit, though, we can have a different discussion about this, that I will stipulate that we have less diesel on hand than we had before. However,
Correct.
Assuming that we have a normal winter, okay, let's make that assumption for just a moment, and assuming that load volume stays where it is for now, I don't see anything that's going to change that anytime soon. Assuming those two things, are we really in trouble?
No, not unless everything came to an absolute screeching halt, which, just like you said, I don't see that happening or
What do you
occurring
mean
anytime.
it came to a screeching halt?
Meaning it would, the rail, that is a big.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, but let's talk about that even. Okay. So locomotives burn more diesel than all the trucks combined.
Correct.
Okay. So if the locomotives burn all this diesel and they don't move, now how much more diesel do I have?
Oh, we're in trouble. We're definitely in trouble.
We're in trouble we're in trouble getting it moved. But my point is, there's still the trains themselves aren't burning the diesel, so you got to get the net out of that.
And that's why I say is that we're still in trouble. What I mean by that, as far as we can't move it. We don't have the tankers to move it.
Agreed, but most plants won't shut down.
Correct.
Okay, they'll continue to produce diesel. So any kind of rail strike, I imagine, would be very, very short.
Well, we would hope for that. I mean, they're seeming to kind of hold their place in the sand, so to speak, on that deal, and that's interesting. The interesting part about it is they are I guess you could say a deciding factor going forward. It's kind of looming, but I mean,
but we've got that problem. Let's say that we have our 100 loaves of bread. We've still got the same problem. I mean, if the railroad strikes or doesn't strike, my point is, if the railroad strikes, that actually increases the amount of diesel that we'll end up having later.
Yes,
it just won't be where we need it to be.
Correct, because that's where I kind of hold is like we would still be in trouble just because we can't move it. I mean, trucks are,
but that doesn't negatively impact any kind of shortage. In fact,
no, absolutely not. No, it just sits there.
It just sits there at the refinery waiting to be moved.
Yep, correct.
Okay,
absolutely.
So railroad strike is, like I said, net neutral. We don't want that to happen simply because that's going to create a whole lot of problems down the line. It would be better if every single station in America was, topped off their diesel tanks, in the next couple of weeks. They won't be able to do that because we don't have that kind of flow right now. But, they should be ready for that, because if we do have to do a bunch more stuff on trucks, they could create. That's where I see the problem happening. Okay, so we're going to pick Joe's Truck Stop and Diesel Refill in Podunk, Tennessee.
Right.
I always stop there. It's the number one place to get great prices and a great prime rib sandwich. Okay, always stop there. So I go into Joe's and I want to fuel up, and he says, "Got to limit you. Sorry, we've only got about half of the diesel we usually have, and none's coming in right now." I don't see that happening and being a real issue across the country.
No, and that's because there's a lot of places like the bigger fuel stops, the more corporate. They've pretty much, the way they work is they pre-buy. They pre-buy it, and that's, they pre-buy based on, whether it's last quarter's volumes or last year's volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And you really you won't see that problem at the major one. Now the smaller ones, the mom and pops, yeah, you definitely are going to, you could see something exactly like what you described there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I use them as an example. I don't even have that problem at Love's. I just don't.
Yeah. No, I don't have that problem. I know I don't have that problem at any of the places that we fuel. Now I have seen it a little bit in some of the smaller stops, like you said, but as far as the bigger ones, Love's, TA, Petros, Ambest and stuff, no, you're not going to see that problem. And there's a lot of fear mongering going on, a lot of false reporting. A good example is the PA Turnpike had a miscommunication with one of their stations, with one of their stops that's on the Turnpike, where a simple miscommunication and the Turnpike puts no fuel at this location. Well, if you actually called it, they're like, no, we got fuel. There was we miscommunicated in the morning. So,
but that happens all the time on the Turnpike.
It does.
There's always a station or two, it seems.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year, that announces they're out of fuel. But I mean, that's not just diesel. They're out of fuel.
No.
Across the board.
Correct.
Nothing.
Oh, correct.
And then you don't hear from them. They fill up the next day, and you don't hear about them again for a long time. I don't know. Maybe someday we get somebody from the Turnpike on here to explain why is it that this happens all the time on the Turnpike, where you get somebody, or are they just better at reporting it than others? I don't know. Again, that gets out there. It's usually a tweet from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. And they come out and they say, such and such at exit so and so, is out of fuel. And I think that's one of those things that has been taken, because it happens all the time. But people are like, oh my gosh, look at this.
Right, exactly. And that comes back into that fear mongering or people taking it to the extreme. And I think a lot of that touts to the current situation we do have with the supply chain. I mean, that's seems to be the hot topic for 2022. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the reality is no, we're not going to run out of diesel fuel. It would really take a screeching halt, a catastrophic event for that to happen.
The final issue here that I think we keep in mind is, I believe, because the president put out, what do they call it? Where the presidential declarations. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Okay. He could, with a stroke of his pen, because he certainly has done a lot of other things with the stroke of the pen, revoke or at least temporarily suspend the Jones Act. Are you familiar with the Jones Act?
I'm not, but I mean, I'm willing to learn, because I've heard it mentioned.
The Jones
I'm not familiar with it.
The Jones Act says that if I'm going to move fuel from Houston to New York, I can only use a U.S. owned shipping vessel.
Really?
Okay. If you're going from the Gulf Coast to any other port, it has to be a U.S. owned shipping vessel. I'll bet.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So if they needed to move a bunch of fuel quickly, and for whatever reason they couldn't, whether that's a rail strike or just, we underestimated demand in the Northeast or whatever. If they want to fix that, I'll bet you they can fix it real fast.
Oh yeah, I mean, if he can remove that act with that simply,
well, I'm sure it takes more than that, but what they do a lot of times, and this is not a Republican Democrat thing. We've seen this going back multiple presidents. Okay, they will, with a strike of a pen, say, "I hereby temporarily suspend this." Okay, now all the lawyers run to court to say, "Wait a minute, you can't do that." And while they're battling that out, they get the vessels to move the oil.
Right.
And
yeah.
by the time they get it fixed, I can't do that. Sorry. All right. Well, I take that off. But now all the oil that we needed to move was moved, and the diesel's where we need it to be.
That would be. So basically, if he removed that act, any kind of tanker we have sitting still or anything, they need to move it from, we'll just say Galveston up to the Northeast, where they just put it on an American moving tanker and just move it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder how that would affect the cost, because that's pretty expensive to put them on them tankers. That's pretty expensive.
Well, I imagine it wouldn't. It's a matter of just saying, okay, so we've got a tanker that's in there from Saudi Arabia, and they got to move it. They can't move it because there's not enough vessels to do it. They suspend the Jones Act, however they do it, and the Saudis say, "I'll move it. Give me the same pay you give, the Americans. I'll move it right now."
Right. Huh. See, I need to read more up on that, because that's something right there that makes the hair on my neck just kind of stand up. We need to know more.
Well, the thing is that act was put in place to protect American vessels from competing with foreign vessels to move stuff from America to America.
Right.
Okay, that's why the act is there. But if that's the only way to keep the country moving, they will figure out a way to suspend it temporarily to keep the country moving. They're not going to go, "Well, no, we made a law. Sorry, that's, we're just going to live with it."
Huh.
So.
that would, and that provides an avenue for relief, though, if we'll just say if the rails did shut down.
Right.
That's a way to provide relief.
It helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we got to take one more break. We'll be back, and we got one more segment. You're listening to TNCRadio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Tom Kelly, James Rogers here with you this evening. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on TNCRadio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on TNCRadio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hey, rideshare drivers and gig economy workers. The host of TNCRadio.live, the Rideshare Rodeo Podcast, and the Gig Economy Podcast come together for news, talk, music, stories, laughs, and more. We're live Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Thank you, Ron. Welcome back in TNCRadio.live. Mind Your Trucking Business. Tom Kelly along with James Rogers. Jamie Irvin stepped out. He'll be back with us next week. So, James, let's jump right back in here. Next subject I wanted to bring up to you is, and it's been getting a lot of press throughout the trucking industry, this double brokering fraud. They just, threw somebody in jail who very much needed to be in jail for doing this. And I think it's possible even that there are some people who got scammed somewhere along the way with a double brokering fraud and still don't understand what actually happened.
Right, and I agree with that. A lot of people don't understand what double brokering is. It happens every day in this industry, multiple times a day.
So start off telling us a little bit, what is double brokering?
All right, double brokering essentially is where you start out with your customer, right? We'll just use General Mills for an example. You have General Mills, and they want to use a broker. It could be, we'll just use Coyote, right? Coyote's the broker. Where double brokering comes in is where you have another broker, right, buy that load from the broker, the original broker. They go in, and whether they act as if they are another trucking company or they just sneak in under the radar.
So Coyote gets the load, and then Tom's brokering company comes and says, Coyote, I got it.
Yep, absolutely. They buy it at the rate or whatever they negotiated from Coyote. Coyote knows no different. And then, boom, Tom's brokerage turns around and sells it to an owner-operator or whoever to haul the load. So now that's where double brokering comes into effect. The biggest issue is there's really no law on the book that prevents it. It's just it's a ethical thing.
So what's wrong? What's wrong with that? So, okay, I get it from Coyote. I need to move a load. Okay. Coyote's got the load. They don't have a driver. I know how to get the driver. So what's wrong with that?
Well, number one, the problem comes in the money. You got too many hands in the problem with the money. And number two, now you come into liability and responsibility. Who's getting paid for what? Who's liable and responsible? Because you now have a brokerage. Coyote's under the impression that Tom's brokerage has all the proper licensing, operating authorities, and everything to move that load. That's what Coyote's under. That load very well could disappear. If they sell it to Tom's brokerage sells it to me as a driver for Spartan Direct. Now I wreck and damage the load. Who's going to get paid? Who's getting paid? And it is. And what happens a lot of times in a double brokering situation is like what's been going through the news is Coyote paid Tom's brokerage, right? Well, Tom's brokerage didn't pay Spartan Direct. So now you got scammed.
That's where it happens. Okay.
Yep.
Is that last piece there. You take this load and I'll take care of you at this rate. Okay. The truth is, I never, ever, ever planned to pay you for anything. Okay.
Exactly.
Coyote has paid. I got Coyote's money. Okay. And you're moving the load under the impression that Tom's brokerage is going to pay you. You may or may not know Coyote's even involved.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
that's where
Mills, you pick it up, you move it to the grocery store and submit your invoice for payment, and you never hear from me again.
Yep. And that's where, and there's actually a point and what they're banking on is they're banking on the inexperienced driver or the driver that's just not paying attention.
Right.
There is a point where you can catch it, and it's when you pick the load up. Mm-hmm. If you look at the bills of lading, by law, they have to put who the carrier is. The majority of the time, most shippers will put who the broker is. If they broker the load, they're going to put out who the broker is. Oh, this goes to Coyote. Coyote's the carrier. Or they will ask you when you check in, who's your carrier? And then they will probably, oh, this is a Coyote load, but you're the carrier. And then they adjust it when you check in. And that's what they're banking on. They're banking on that inexperience. They're banking on not paying attention, just run of the mill, going through your day. But that's usually where you catch it. Right there is on the bills. Absolutely. Okay. I mean, we had an incident this past week where we had booked a load with one broker. We went to pick the load up, and it was another broker's load, completely another broker's load. So, what we ended up doing was we contacted who we booked it through. They did not want to acknowledge it. They didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to do nothing. So what we did is we ended up contacting the brokers who was on the bills, and they're like, yeah, well, this is our load. We sold it to, they thought they were selling it to another truck company. And it does. It happens every day. There are some companies, large companies, as a matter of fact, that do it daily.
And
they do it daily.
Part of the problem here right now, I think, is, as we discussed earlier in the program, loads are down.
Yes.
And people are scrambling, and they're saying yes faster than they should, kind of crossing their fingers. Because look, have you ever moved a load that there wasn't some kind of little problem here or there? I mean, that's part of being a driver.
No, exactly. That's just part of every day.
Yeah. And they misspelled James, and they put it, 2 D's in Rogers, and and there's always something, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it's always something, and that is what they bank on, is you're not going to catch it. You're not going to catch the little detail and the nuance. Absolutely.
And in the process, suddenly you're driving a load that nobody's going to pay for, and it's usually the driver, and that is that last truck that's going to be the one who's in trouble, or his boss, or whatever. It's over signed off to. And sometimes the load can even, when we do this real end around where the guy who picks up the load isn't even, legit either. But that's a different story.
Exactly. And you're right. I mean, what you run in with is, it's like, if you have an owner-operator platform, if you own a fleet and your owner-operators, your platform is owner-operators, then it is the owner-operator that's going to suffer, because if you don't get paid, you're not going to pay that owner-operator for it. If you have company drivers and your company driver just pulled it, then you as the company are going to be the one that takes a hit, because you still have to pay your employee, but you're not going to get paid for it.
Right.
It creates, that's where the legalities and where they nailed this one individual with the scam, was because of the amount of money that was involved in it. The other issues you also run into is like, they don't have the insurance, because I guarantee you, in that situation, one of the common things that really tips me off about loads that possibly may be double brokered is when a broker asks me, I need you to add me to your insurance as a certificate holder. Why? Why do you need my access to my insurance?
Right.
Because they don't intend to pull you, or they'll say this load was lost, and then they're getting paid. So there are things to watch for in that situation. Like I said, double brokering, it is, sadly to say, it happens every day, multiple times a day across this industry. And it's a bad practice, a very bad practice.
And one that, so briefly, what's the solution here? Well, in one of the periodicals that we look at, there's not a fast solution here, because this would take the FMCSA to create basically a whole department to track this down. They don't have the manpower.
No.
We need some clear legislation that's going to, and listen, you guys can count up the number of times I've said we need more regulations in trucking. I'd never say that. But on this one, we got to do something to clean it up, because like you said, except for the part where you didn't pay, all the way up until then, you didn't break any laws.
Correct. Yeah, correct. And like I said, there's no law in the book. That's actually been one of the big arguments for drivers and owner operators in particular to the FMCSA, congressional leaders and stuff, is that we need some sort of regulation and oversight on brokers, because from the start, a broker doesn't require a lot.
Right.
Do they have to get an authority and all that stuff? Yeah, they do. But outside of that, there's no regulation beyond it. There really is no regulation.
You can get authority. I mean, that's not hard.
$300 $300 and then a bond. That's it. A security bond, and they're in business.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, we got to wrap things up here, James. I really appreciate you and your insight, your real life working with drivers, and owning your own company. Tell us a little bit about your company real quick.
Well, name of the company, Spartan Direct LLC. We're right now we're a small 7-truck fleet, but we're growing every day. We haul refrigerated and dry van now, and operate mainly in the Midwest. But we've been very fortunate to keep working through what this country's faced. I'd like to say that we've played a big role in hopefully trying to rectify some of the supply chain stuff, because we are a veteran-owned company, and we do have veterans at work that take pride in what they do for this country. So that's pretty much what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We do appreciate it. If people want to hear more from you, you've got a YouTube channel.
I do. I got a small YouTube channel that's growing every day. It's called the Road Rage Podcast. And it's not necessarily it's centered around trucking. We talk about football, everyday life, but we try to hit a lot of the major topics that are going on in this industry. We try to talk to other drivers. We like to get their perspective and everything to give as good advice or knowledge and as we can about what's going on. Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. We appreciate that. Jamie Urban's not here, but you can hear more from him on the Heavy Duty Parts Report. That's a heavydutypartsreport.com. Check out Jamie's stuff there. Of course, tncradio.live. We've got programming for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And invite you to check us out. That's tncradio.live. You can check us out on the web. You can download our app. You can find us on like 4,000 different devices, Roku TV, Alexa, all of it. We're out there everywhere. So check us out, tncradio.live. You've been listening to Mind Your Trucking Business, and we'll be with you again next week right here.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.